There's a great story from Britain with the English rowing team, and I think it was the Sydney Olympics, and I think that was 92. And the English rowing team hadn't won a medal in almost 100 years. And what they did is they got really radically focused, and they set it up where everybody on the team asked and answered one question: will this make the boat go faster?
Your business's success depends on relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with Dusty Holcomb. He is relentlessly focused on helping leaders drop the overwhelm, gain clarity, and scale without burning out. As CEO and founder of the Arcus Group, he equips CEOs, entrepreneurs, and senior leaders with a proven leadership operating system that turns vision into action and unlocks exponential growth. With 25 plus years leading high growth organizations, including CEO of a fast growing e-commerce logistics firm and nearly 2 decades at AAA Carolinas, Dusty understands what it takes to lead through complexity and change. His work centers around the idea that true leadership begins with self-leadership, and his approach is clear-eyed, disciplined, and execution-focused. Outside of work, he is a health optimization enthusiast, avid sportsman, and a 5-time Ironman finisher. He's also the host of the podcast Leadership Unlocked, the stories that shape great leaders, exploring the keystone moments that shape extraordinary leaders. Above all, Dusty is husband to Tara and proud dad to Maddie, Davis, Hire, and guided by a core mission to enable purpose and success in others. Whether he's coaching one-on-one, facilitating elite leadership cohorts, or speaking from the stage, he delivers a practical, results-driven path for leaders committed to clarity, confidence, and lasting impact. Congrats on enabling purpose and success in others, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thank you, Carl. Delighted to be here, man. I have to tell you, I love just the way you start the human connection, because at the end of the day, that's what we're doing, is we're enabling other humans to get focused on what's most important and create results, whether that's in business or in life. So love it. Delighted to be here.
Thanks. And yeah, I think what you do is really important, because before you can connect with other people, you have to understand who you are, especially if you're in a leadership role. And I know we had talked about earlier about there being a lot of leadership bottlenecks that companies suffer from. So what are some of those main bottlenecks that you help people deal with, and how are they so pervasive at slowing down companies' growth?
You know, the bottlenecks, it's so interesting. One of my favorite books of all time is The Goal, and it's a manufacturing environment book, and it talks about where you identify the bottlenecks in a manufacturing process. Well, when I think about it through the leadership process, the bottlenecks start to occur when the leader doesn't get clarity for themselves, when they don't have a clear understanding and have invested the time in themselves and for themselves, not in a selfish way, in a way to optimize others. Then they're going to have a much more difficult time to go to the next stage, which is around building alignment, which is what sets up the capability to do great execution. So bottleneck number one is a limiting for the leader around the creation of clarity for themselves and for the organization. And that really sets up the whole cascade from there.
And so, yeah, I mean, definitely it seems like if the leaders aren't clear on what they should be doing or what the direction is, they're supposed to be setting the guiding light for everyone else. If they're not clear, or if that light is not laser focused in the right direction, then there's all sorts of problems that cascade from that. So I imagine you have some great success stories with helping leaders attain that clarity. How do you help them do that?
Yeah, what I like to simplify things, because it's so easy to get complicated. It's so easy to get a 28-point bullet, point presentation. Let's simplify this. And there's really 5 things, and I'll give you some success stories that come out of this, but there's 5 core questions that if a leader can ask and answer for themselves and go to their team member and have them able to ask and answer those questions without the leader in the room, that they can know they're on the right path. And question number 1 is really, It's a simple one, but it's why are we here? What's our purpose beyond making money? And I think it's critical because that's what allows someone to connect to the work emotionally, spiritually, personally, beyond just, showing up at a transactional level. Question number 2 is, where are we going? And that's the vision. That's the place that we're going over the horizon. And people want to know that. People really want to understand that. Question number 3 is, how are we going to get there? What's the plan? People want to know that their leaders have a plan, that they're not just showing up as, automatons to do the work. And then the next 2 questions are the ones where I think most leaders underestimate the impact and importance. And that's question number 4 is, where do I fit in? What's in it that I do? How does my work contribute? And that enables the last question, which is, what's in it for me? And that people think about that through the lens of financial, but it's not always that. It can be alignment, it can be opportunity, it can be the place and space to grow personally or professionally. So success stories that come from that, and I'm thinking right now of a client who's in one of our leadership cohorts, and they stepped back and said, hey, when I got clear for myself, I realized that what I was doing is I was enabling the organization to say no. Now, hear me out. Like, that seems counterintuitive, but what they had done is they stepped back, they got clear, they created a bigger vision, and then they distilled it and spent the time casting that into the organization. And they were realizing that what they did was allow the organization, the people within the organization, to say no to all the things that weren't important. And so I like to think of this through the lens of, if we ask and answer these questions in advance, it enables us to say no. And that's the hardest thing for most people to do, especially those who want to serve. We want to help others. We want to give. But to say no, if we've decided in advance what's happened or what's most important, we enable that. So some success stories that come from that. Certainly the current client that's going through that situation. I've had clients in the past where they were able to get their team focused on the most important things and eliminate the noise. And so by creating clarity, they were able to build the alignment that unlocked the execution so the team could move further and faster.
I think that's so powerful, because being able to say no is often, or not being able to say no is often a huge anchor on the growth of a company, because they try and do too many things. They try and work with too many clients that aren't a good fit, that are going to be more of a detractor than a profit leader, or just a bad relationship. And by the leaders being able to say, no, this is not what we're doing. It's like the classic example is Jobs coming in to save Apple. He said no to all but like a handful of their products. They had a bloated product line and no one could tell them apart. So he said no to most of the business, and the business skyrocketed and grew and is now the behemoth it is. But the not being able to say no is what made Apple go from like 90 days from bankruptcy. And then just saying no to most of the stuff is what made that switch. And so I think there's this desire, especially when you know your product so well, you know what you're doing, you think, oh, it works for everyone and help with anything. And it's really, that's just not feasible. And so having a leader being able to clearly say, no, we're doing X, not Y, and having the teams being able to have the clarity on that enables so much more growth, because you're now all moving in the same direction, not just kind of scatterbrained the entire time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I love the Jobs story. And that's one I use often when trying to convey the importance here. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is from Warren Buffett, where he talks about the most successful people say no to almost everything. And so it's the ability to determine in advance what's most important that empowers the no. There's a great story from Britain with the English rowing team, and I think it was the Sydney Olympics, and I think that was 92. And the English rowing team hadn't won a medal in almost 100 years. And what they did is they got really radically focused, and they set it up where everybody on the team asked and answered one question: will this make the boat go faster? Do I go out after practice today and have a beer at the pub? I don't know. Will it make the boat go faster? No. Okay, then that's off the list. Will it make the boat go faster? So I like to encourage leaders to find that question for their organization that everybody in the organization from top to bottom can really lean into and grab it as a rallying cry. The other thing that I think most leaders, in addition to wanting to say yes and not having the courage or the power to say no, is they underestimate how many times they need to repeat themselves, that they need to cast the communication to build that human connection, because they think they can say it once and it sticks, and it doesn't. And I always like to think of this through the lens of, you have to say it so many times until it echoes. When you hear it coming back to you from every point of the organization, wow, you know that it's really starting to sink in. My last couple of organizations, when I was the CEO or president, everybody knew that when I started town hall meetings, or that when we were having one-on-ones or skip levels or anything else, I was going to always talk about three things: our purpose as an organization, our vision, and our core values, what we believed in, that we held most dear. We'd go wherever we wanted from the conversation from that point, but they knew when they saw me coming, those are the three things Dusty's going to talk about, because I knew that I had to say it until my ears were bleeding, because that's how I knew that it would stick into the company.
Yeah, I think it's something that there's a kind of fallacy that we think that because we understand something or care about something, that other people share the same knowledge and understanding and emotional connection to it. And until you, like I said, until you hear it being repeated back to you by people without needing to be prompted, then you can't be sure that they actually heard it or they internalized it. And it's something that I think is more important than ever, because there's just this lack of connection with the work. People don't really feel like they're where they belong. They don't feel like they have that purpose, or like, how do I contribute, or what do I get besides the paycheck from this? Because those questions aren't even being asked, or it's certainly not being answered by leadership, and not communicated in a way beyond just like, here's a poster in the break room sort of thing, where it's like, and the rest is just a transaction. And so people quickly lose focus or lose motivation, or aren't inspired to do great work, because there's so much of it's just a transaction to them. And so the leadership, again, they think, oh, we went through this exercise as a leadership team, and we all agreed on these things that you're supposed to care about, and it just automatically will populate throughout the rest of the company. That just, no, you got to, like you said, repeat it every time you're talking to people. Lead with those things. I think it's a great habit for leaders to get into, is once you know what your like the vision, the mission, the values, the purpose, you got to repeat that until people are, like I said, saying it back to you. Otherwise, you're basically have done a nice little like thought exercise, but you're not actually presenting it, and you're not projecting it to your team in the way that you think you are.
I could agree with you more. And what I like about the words you're using there is, I think the greatest leaders move past transaction. In fact, when you think about connection, the human connection is relational. So the greatest leaders are not looking to transactionally unlock the effort of their team members. What they're looking to do is unlock discretionary effort, the extra effort. And the absolute only way that you get discretionary effort is by connecting with that person and connecting that person's value system and drive to meaning, to work that matters. Now, does that mean that every single person in the organization is going to be 100% committed? Well, we'd like that, but probably not, especially in larger organizations. And that's okay. I mean, you're going to have people who show up and do the job. But what we really want is to unlock discretionary effort. And the only way to do that is to build a relational connection between the work and the reason they're there, and give them the information they need to connect the dots. I mean, that's what great leaders are. They're dot connectors. They are there to help those team members answer the questions.
And I think it's something that, like a lot of the issues with business, in the pursuit of making the numbers look good, that companies have cut a lot of these corners, that they think over efficiency or to speed up results, we're going to take these actions that end up undercutting their success, because they're not engaging with or building the relationships with their team members that are executing on what the business needs to get done. And they're just focusing on, well, how do we make the numbers look good? And if they just take more time to invest in the people and build these relationships, the numbers would look good. But there's this misunderstanding that the business is something without the people. And if all the employees just didn't show up one day, you don't have a company. And you can have all the best like systems and tools and technology, but it's still a person that is showing up and doing the work. And if you take care of the employees better and make those connections, invest in your team, then they'll pay that forward in how well they connect with your clients and your customers. And that leads to the results, the growth, the sales, the profit that you're looking for. But there's this overall idea that they can make things more efficient or cut corners or automate things past the point of what's really humanly possible, and it ends up undercutting their own success because they're trying to cut the human element out of it, and you need that humanity to make things work.
You do, and hearing you walk through that, and I agree with your premise there. I think companies maybe not maliciously try to do these things, but they become slaves to the wrong success metrics. I think companies do two things that they really, and I'm talking in broad terms here. One is they underestimate the impact and power of being intrinsically focused on their team members, that if they take care of their team members, that will take care of the customer, and that's what takes care of the bottom line. Now, it still takes good stewardship and good decision-making and all these other things. The other element that's tied to what you're talking about that I think companies and leaders underestimate or fall victim of is they become internally focused on what they're doing, not externally motivated by what the customer wants and needs. What is the value that the customer is receiving from what we're doing? They're giving you assets, money. Like, we don't have a company without people. We don't have a company without customers. And so what is the value that the customer is receiving? And when every person in the organization understands the value promise, the value proposition, they seek to fulfill that, not sell whatever it is the customer does. Because people aren't buying, just a widget. They can get that from anywhere. They can, that's just a race to, being completely commoditized if you're just focused on that. What's the value prop? So I think when companies start doing what you're talking about and trying to streamline and cut corners and be a slave to the numbers, they've lost sight of two things: the value contribution of their team members and what it is the customer's actually buying.
Yeah, and it's something that these days, with how much competition is out there and how easy it is for things to be churned out that are fairly low quality, especially when it comes to content or like apps or products and stuff, that you can't just be transactional anymore. You can't just be another one of the thousands of options. You have to build those relationships with customers and clients and be more valuable beyond the transaction, because that's what gets people to feel like they're connected and belong and have some sense of loyalty and community around the brand and the company. And that's what allows for sustainable growth as a business, because if they're just glued away by the next sale that one of your competitors is throwing on, then you have no long-term value, and you have no repeatable income from these people. And there's only so many people that can buy your product. You're just kind of churning through customers because no one sticks around past the first renewal option. And you're basically spinning your wheels with no traction.
You really are. There's a wonderful book by Charles Koch called Good Profit, where he talks about exactly this. What is it that we're creating for the customer? How do we manage and maintain good profits? Those are long-term, durable, sustainable profit streams. And there's nothing wrong with making profit. You have to. That's the way the markets work. But you can't do it by burning things through customers, churning through people internally. You have to do it the right way with a long-term mindset. If you don't have a long-term mindset, you're going to default to a transactional state.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Dusty. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Dusty, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, It's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.